The transport ship descended through clouds of purple and gold as Daniel Carter looked out the window at the below. He had seen many alien worlds during his years of service, but this one took his breath away. Massive towers of white stone rose from the surface like fingers reaching toward the sky. Rivers of silver water cut through forests of blue trees. It was beautiful in a way that made him feel very small. Sat beside him, reviewing documents on her tablet. She was the lead ambassador for this mission, a woman in her 50s with hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had spent 30 years building bridges between humanity and alien civilizations. This mission was supposed to be her greatest achievement. "The Emperor has agreed to meet with us tomorrow," said without looking up. "If we can secure this trade agreement, it will open doors to 7 other star systems. This is big, Daniel, really big." Daniel nodded but said nothing. He was not here as a diplomat. He was here as security, a former Marine who had traded his rifle for a suit and tie. 15 years of special operations had left him tired of war. He wanted to help build peace now, not destroy enemies. But old habits were hard to break, and his eyes kept scanning for threats even in this moment of calm. The ship landed in a courtyard surrounded by warriors. They were tall beings, almost 8 feet in height, with skin the color of dark copper and eyes that glowed faint orange. Their bodies were built for combat, with 4 arms and muscles that rippled beneath ceremonial armor. Each warrior carried a curved blade at their side, the traditional weapon of their people. Daniel stepped off the ship first, as protocol demanded. He kept his hands visible and his movements slow. They respected strength, but they also respected caution. A warrior who rushed into unknown territory was a fool in their eyes. An official approached them and bowed slightly. "Welcome to Prime. I am Counselor. The Emperor awaits your presence at the evening feast. First, you will be shown to your quarters." Smiled warmly. "Thank you, Counselor. We are honored to be here." They were led through winding corridors of polished stone. Murals on the walls depicted great battles from history, scenes of warriors clashing with blades under alien suns. Daniel studied them as they walked. They were proud people who had built their entire civilization on the concept of honor through combat. Every dispute, from personal insults to matters of state, could be settled in ritual duels. It was a system that seemed brutal to human eyes, but it had kept their society stable for thousands of years. The evening feast was held in a great hall beneath a domed ceiling painted with stars. Hundreds of nobles sat at long tables, eating and drinking and watching the human visitors with curious eyes. Daniel felt those eyes on him as he walked beside toward the high table where the Emperor sat. Emperor was ancient by standards. His copper skin faded to a dull bronze, his 4 arms thin but still strong. He wore a crown of black metal and watched the humans approach with an expression that revealed nothing. "Ambassador," the Emperor said in a voice like grinding stone, "you honor us with your presence. Sit, eat. We have much to discuss." The feast continued for hours. Spoke with the Emperor about trade routes and resource sharing, about cultural exchange programs and mutual defense treaties. Daniel sat quietly and ate strange foods that tasted of spices he could not name. He watched the crowd and noted which nobles seemed friendly and which seemed hostile. Most of them appeared curious about the humans, perhaps even cautiously optimistic about the alliance. But one figure at a nearby table watched them with open hatred. She was a female, younger than most of the nobles, with copper skin unmarked by age and eyes that burned brighter than the others. She wore the robes of a religious figure, white fabric trimmed with red, and a curved blade hung at her side. Throughout the feast, her gaze never left the humans. "Who is that?" Daniel whispered to Counselor. The Counselor followed his gaze and frowned. "That is High Priestess. She leads the traditionalist faction in our government. They believe they should remain isolated from other species. She opposed this meeting and has spoken publicly against any alliance with humanity." Daniel filed the information away and continued watching. Near the end of the feast, stood from her table and walked toward the high platform where the Emperor sat. The hall grew quiet as she approached. Even the Emperor seemed surprised by her boldness. "Forgive my interruption," my Emperor said, her voice carrying across the silent hall. "But I cannot remain silent while our sacred traditions are forgotten. We speak of alliance with these humans, but what do we truly know of them? They are small. They are weak. They come from a world so gentle that their bodies have no natural weapons. How can such creatures stand as equals to the—" Stood to respond, but continued before she could speak. "Our ancestors built this empire through strength and honor. Every treaty we have ever signed was sealed with blood, with proof that our allies were worthy of standing beside us. Yet these humans come with only words. Pretty words, perhaps, but words are wind. She turned and pointed directly at Daniel. Her blade seemed to leap into her hand, the metal catching the light as she raised it toward him. I invoke the ancient right of challenge. Let this human prove the worth of his species. Let him face me in the arena of honor. If he wins, the treaty may proceed. If he falls, the humans will leave our world and never return. The hall exploded with noise. Nobles shouted in surprise and excitement. Grabbed Daniel's arm, her face pale with shock. She cannot do this, hissed. This is a diplomatic mission. We have immunity. But Counselor shook his head slowly. The right of challenge supersedes all other law. It is older than our empire itself. If the human refuses, it will be seen as proof that humanity is unworthy. The treaty will die either way. Daniel looked at. She was smiling now, cold and confident, certain that she had just destroyed any hope of alliance between their peoples. She expected him to refuse or to accept and die quickly. Either outcome served her purposes. He thought of everything humanity had worked for. He thought of the 7-star systems that would open to them if this treaty succeeded. He thought of the peace he had come here to help build. Daniel gently removed his hand from his arm and stepped forward. I accept your challenge, he said. The hall fell silent again. His smile faltered for just a moment before returning stronger than before. Then you will die at dawn, she said, and your species will learn its place in the galaxy. She turned and walked away, leaving Daniel standing alone before the shocked faces of 2 civilizations. The door to the human quarters closed behind them, and immediately began packing the floor. Her calm diplomatic mask had shattered completely, replaced by raw fear and anger. This is madness, she said. Absolute madness. I am contacting Earth Command right now. There has to be some way to stop this. Daniel stood by the window, looking out at the alien city below. Lights glowed in thousands of windows, and he could hear distant sounds of celebration from the streets. They were excited about tomorrow's spectacle. They had not seen a human fight before, and they expected entertainment. There is no time, Daniel said quietly. The duel is at dawn. Even if Earth Command could do something, they are too far away. Stopped packing and stared at him. Then we leave right now. We get on our ship and we go home. And prove to every in the galaxy that humans are cowards, that we run from challenges. Daniel shook his head. The damage would be worse than if I simply lose tomorrow. At least if I fight, we show that humanity has courage. Courage is meaningless if you are dead, said. Her voice cracked slightly, and Daniel realized she was more frightened than angry. She had brought him here. She felt responsible for what was about to happen. He walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. I appreciate your concern, Ambassador, but I need you to trust me. I did not spend 15 years in special operations by accident. I know how to fight. Against humans, said. Against enemies you understood. They are different. They are faster, stronger, and they have been training with blades since childhood. Is their greatest warrior. She has killed dozens of opponents in the arena. No one has ever survived her opening strike. Daniel smiled slightly. Then I will have to be the first. A knock at the door interrupted them. Daniel moved to answer it, his body automatically shifting into a defensive stance. When the door opened, he found a young standing in the corridor, looking nervous. Please, the young alien said in a whisper. I must speak with the human challenger. It is a matter of honor. Daniel studied him for a moment. The young was smaller than the warriors he had seen at the feast, his copper skin smooth and unmarked by battle scars. He wore simple clothing rather than armor, and his eyes darted nervously up and down the corridor. Come in, Daniel said, stepping aside. The young entered quickly, and Daniel closed the door behind him. Watched with suspicion, but Daniel raised a hand to calm her. I am called, the young alien said. My father served on the border patrol 5 cycles ago. He was wounded in a skirmish with raiders, and human medics saved his life when our own healers were too far away. He speaks of humans with great respect. When I heard about the challenge, I knew I had to come. Why? Daniel asked. Hesitated, then spoke quickly. Is the deadliest blade master of her generation. She has developed a technique that no one can counter. When the duel begins, she will not circle or test your defenses as tradition demands. She will attack immediately, a single strike aimed at your throat. The movement is so fast that her opponents are dead before they understand what happened. Every duel she has fought has ended in seconds. Daniel nodded slowly, one strike aimed at the throat. Yes, she believes it shows her superiority. Why waste time on a weaker opponent when she can end things instantly? She will do the same to you. I am certain of it. Step forward. How do we counter it? Is there a weakness in the technique? Shook his head sadly. No has ever found one. Her speed is beyond anything we have seen. By the time you react, the blade is already through your neck. But you came here anyway, Daniel said, even though you have no solution for me. I came because you deserve to know what you face. I came because my father taught me that honor means standing with those who helped you, even when you cannot change the outcome. His voice grew heavy with emotion. I am sorry I cannot do more. Daniel placed his hand on shoulder, a gesture of respect between warriors. You have done enough. Knowing what she will do is more valuable than you realize. Thank you. The young nodded and slipped out of the room as quietly as he had entered. Daniel stood in silence for a long moment after he left. Daniel said softly, even knowing her strategy, how can you possibly stop something that fast? He turned to face her, and his eyes had changed. The gentle diplomat was gone, replaced by something harder and more focused. This was the man who had survived 15 years in the most dangerous places humanity had ever known. Speed is not everything, Daniel said. It is important, yes. But the fastest strike in the world is useless if your opponent knows exactly when and where it will come, has made herself predictable. She is so confident in her technique that she uses it every single time. She has become a slave to her own success. But even if you know it is coming, can you actually stop it? Daniel was quiet for a moment. I will not lie to you. I do not know. They are faster than humans. Their reflexes are sharper. On paper, I should have no chance. He walked back to the window and looked out at the stars above the alien city. But humans have been surviving impossible situations for a very long time. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the fastest, but we adapt. We endure. We find ways to win when the odds say we should lose. Watched him standing there, silhouetted against the alien sky, and she realized she had no more arguments to offer. This man had made his decision, and nothing she said would change it. What do you need from me? She asked. Keep the diplomatic channels open. Whatever happens tomorrow, do not let this become a war. If I fall, find another way to make peace. Promise me. I promise. Daniel nodded and sat down on the floor in the center of the room. He crossed his legs and closed his eyes, beginning the meditation techniques he had learned long ago. His breathing slowed. His muscles relaxed. His mind grew quiet. Watched for a few minutes, then dimmed the lights and retreated to her own room. There was nothing more she could do tonight. Daniel sat in the darkness, preparing his body and mind for what was coming. He thought about Strike, playing it over and over in his imagination. He visualized the moment when she would move, the angle of her blade, the target on his throat. He practiced his response 1,000 times in his head, training his reflexes through pure mental repetition. The hours passed slowly. Outside the window, the alien stars wheeled across the sky as the planet turned. Daniel did not sleep. He did not need to. He had spent many nights like this before battles, finding peace in the stillness before violence. When the first light of dawn touched the horizon, he opened his eyes and stood. His body was calm. His mind was clear. He was ready. The door opened, and counselors stood waiting to escort him to the arena. The time for preparation was over. Now came the moment of truth. The arena was ancient, built from white stone that had stood for 10,000 years. Rows of seats rose in great circles around a central fighting pit, packed with thousands of who had come to witness the spectacle. Their voices merged into a constant roar of excitement that shook the air itself. Daniel walked through a tunnel toward the light. His footsteps echoed off the stone walls. Behind him, and Counselor followed, but he barely noticed them. His entire focus had narrowed to what lay ahead. He stepped out into the arena, and the roar of the crowd grew even louder. Sunlight fell in golden sheets from the open sky above. The fighting pit was a circle of packed earth, perhaps 50 feet across, with no obstacles or features. Just open ground where two opponents would meet. On the far side of the arena, emerged from her own tunnel. She wore ceremonial armor of black metal that covered her torso and arms, leaving her legs free for movement. Her curved blade hung at her side, the same weapon she had pointed at Daniel during the feast. She walked with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. The crowd cheered for their champion, raised her arms and accepted their adoration, turning in a slow circle to acknowledge every section of the audience. Then her eyes found Daniel across the pit, and her expression hardened into cold satisfaction. An elderly in white robes walked to the center of the arena. This was the arbiter, the official who would oversee the duel and declare its outcome. He raised his hands, and the crowd slowly fell silent. "We gather to witness a contest of honor," the arbiter announced, his voice amplified by hidden technology. "High Priestess has issued challenge to the human Daniel Carter. The terms are thus: victory grants the right to determine whether the proposed treaty between the Empire and the human coalition shall proceed. The duel ends when one combatant yields, is rendered unable to continue, or dies." Daniel walked forward to meet at the center of the pit. Up close, she was even more impressive than he had realized. Her body radiated controlled power, every muscle trained to perfection. Her forearms were positioned in a combat stance he did not recognize, two hands near her blade and two held wide for balance. "Do you require a weapon?" the arbiter asked Daniel. "Tradition allows the challenged party to choose their arms." Daniel shook his head. "I will fight with my hands." A ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. Even the arbiter seemed confused by this choice. Smile widened with contempt. "Truly, humans are as foolish as they are weak," she said loud enough for the audience to hear. "You come unarmed against the greatest blade in our empire. This will not even be a contest. It will be an execution." Daniel said nothing. He simply watched her, his body relaxed, his breathing steady. "Very well," the arbiter said. "When I lower my hand, the duel begins. May honor guide your actions." He stepped back, leaving Daniel alone in the center of the pit. The crowd held its breath. Every eye in the arena focused on the two figures standing face to face. Daniel looked into his burning orange eyes and spoke quietly, so only she could hear. "You do not have to do this. We can still find another way." Smile vanished, replaced by genuine anger. "You dare speak to me of other ways? You are nothing. Your species is nothing. In moments I will prove this to the entire galaxy." The arbiter raised his hand high. The arena fell absolutely silent. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat, slow and steady, counting the seconds. The hand dropped. Moved. Her speed was everything it promised and more. She became a blur of motion, her blade leaving its sheath and arcing toward Daniel's throat in a single fluid movement. The attack was so fast that most of the audience saw only a flash of metal. They expected to see blood spray through the air, expected to hear Daniel's body hit the ground. Instead, they heard a sharp crack of impact. Daniel's hands came up in the fraction of a second before the blade reached his throat. He caught the flat of the blade between his palms, stopping it inches from his skin. The force of the strike drove him backward, his feet sliding through the dirt, but he held firm. Blood welled up where the edges of the blade cut into his palms, but his grip did not weaken. The arena went completely silent. Not a single voice spoke, not a single body moved. Stared at her blade trapped between Daniel's bleeding hands, and her face showed pure shock. This had never happened before. No one had ever stopped her strike. It was not possible. It could not be possible. Daniel looked into her eyes and spoke again, his voice calm despite the blood dripping from his wounds. "You should not have done that." Before could react, Daniel twisted his body and pulled the blade sideways. The unexpected movement tore the weapon from her grip. He spun with the momentum, bringing the blade around in a wide arc that forced to leap backward. She stumbled, off balance for the first time in any duel she had ever fought. Daniel did not give her time to recover. He stepped forward and struck with the blade's handle, catching her in the stomach. She doubled over with a grunt of pain. His knee came up and connected with her chin, snapping her head back. A sweep of his leg took her feet from under her. The greatest blade master of her generation crashed onto her back in the dirt of the arena floor. Daniel stood over her, holding her own blade with blood-soaked hands. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some screamed in outrage. Others cheered in disbelief. The noise was deafening, but Daniel heard none of it. His eyes were locked on, watching for any sign that she would continue fighting. She lay still, staring up at him with an expression he could not read. Her chest heaved with rapid breaths. Her four hands lay open at her sides, empty of weapons. She had been defeated in seconds, brought down by a creature she had dismissed as weak and worthless. Daniel raised the blade. The crowd fell silent again, waiting for the killing blow. By law, he had every right to end her life. She had challenged him with lethal intent, and now she lay at his mercy. He looked at the blade in his hands, feeling its weight, seeing his own blood running down its edge. He thought about everything this moment represented. He thought about what his choice would mean for humanity's future. Then he flipped the blade around and drove it point first into the ground beside its head. The weapon stood there like a grave marker, its handle quivering from the impact. Daniel stepped back and extended his bloodied hand toward his fallen opponent. "I did not come here to kill," he said. "I came here to prove that humans are worthy of alliance. I hope I have done so." The arena held its breath, waiting to see what would do next. Stared at the offered hand like it was some kind of trick. In all her years of combat, no opponent had ever shown her mercy. The concept simply did not exist in dueling culture. You won or you lost. You lived or you died. There was no middle ground. Yet here stood this human, his palms cut to ribbons by her own blade, offering to help her rise instead of delivering the killing blow she deserved. "Why?" she whispered. The word came out hoarse, barely audible above the murmuring crowd. Daniel kept his hand extended. "Because killing you proves nothing except that I can kill. I would rather prove that humans know when not to kill. That is a harder lesson to teach." For a long moment did not move. The crowd watched in confused silence. Then slowly, she reached up with one of her 4 hands and gripped Daniel's forearm in the traditional gesture of respect between warriors. He pulled her to her feet. The crowd did not know how to react. Some cheered tentatively. Others shouted in protest. The rules of honor had been followed, but the outcome was so unexpected that no one knew what to make of it. The arbiter stepped forward and raised his hands for silence. "The duel is concluded. By the ancient laws of challenge, Daniel Carter of humanity is victorious. The terms of the challenge are binding. The treaty negotiations will proceed." Emperor stood from his seat in the highest section of the arena. His ancient face revealed nothing, but his voice carried clearly across the vast space. "I have witnessed something extraordinary today. A human faced our greatest warrior and survived her legendary strike. More than that, he showed mercy to a fallen enemy. This is not weakness, as some might believe. This is strength of a different kind. I declare the human Daniel Carter to be honored among the—" The Emperor's words seemed to break the spell of confusion over the crowd. Cheering erupted from many sections, though pockets of angry silence remained. Daniel knew this victory had not won over everyone. The traditionalists would still oppose the alliance, but it was a start. Medical attendants rushed into the arena to treat Daniel's wounded hands. The cuts were deep but not dangerous. He allowed them to wrap bandages around his palms while hurried down from the stands to meet him. "That was incredible," she said, her voice shaking with relief and amazement. "I have never seen anything like it in my entire career." "Neither have I," said a voice behind them. They turned to find standing there her armor dusty and her pride clearly wounded. But something had changed in her eyes. The burning hatred was gone, replaced by something more complex. Confusion, perhaps, or the beginning of respect. "How did you do it?" she asked Daniel. "My strike is impossible to counter. I have spent my entire life perfecting it." "You made yourself predictable," Daniel said simply. "Every opponent you faced expected traditional combat. They waited for you to circle, to probe, to test their defenses. By attacking immediately, you caught them off guard. But I knew what was coming. I had time to prepare." "Who told you?" Daniel hesitated, unwilling to betray his trust, but before he could answer, waved away the question. "It does not matter. Even knowing what I would do, you still had to be fast enough to react, strong enough to hold the blade, brave enough to face me without a weapon." She paused, struggling with the words. "I underestimated you. I underestimated your entire species. That was my true defeat today." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of nobles who parted before her. Daniel watched her go, wondering what thoughts were turning behind those burning orange eyes. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. Daniel found himself surrounded by who wanted to shake his hand, touch his bandages, and hear the story of how he had stopped the unstoppable strike. Many of them had wagered heavily on and lost fortunes, but they did not seem to mind. They had witnessed history, and that was worth more than money. Moved through the crowds like a shark through water, using the momentum of Daniel's victory to push the treaty negotiations forward. By midnight, She had secured preliminary agreements on 3 major trade routes and a cultural exchange program. The emperor himself had expressed interest in sending warriors to train with human military forces. But not everyone was celebrating. In a dark chamber far from the festivities, a group of gathered around a table lit by a single candle. These were members of the traditionalist faction, those who believed contact with other species would corrupt culture. At their head sat a warrior named, whose copper skin was marked by dozens of battle scars and whose eyes burned even brighter than his sisters. "This is unacceptable," growled. "Has brought shame upon our entire movement. She was supposed to destroy the human, not lose to him." "She did not expect such resistance," another traditionalist said. "No one could have predicted what happened." "Predictions are irrelevant. Results are what matter," slammed his fist on the table. "The treaty will proceed now. Within a generation, humans will be everywhere on our worlds. Their weak culture will infect our children. Everything our ancestors built will crumble." "What do you propose?" asked a third voice. His face twisted into something dark and dangerous. "The human won his duel fairly. We cannot challenge that without dishonoring ourselves. But accidents happen. People die in unexpected ways. If the human champion were to disappear, the treaty would lose its foundation. The emperor might reconsider." The gathered traditionalists exchanged uncertain glances. What proposed went against their code of honor, but desperation had a way of making dishonorable acts seem necessary. "I will need warriors I can trust," continued. "Those willing to strike in shadow rather than sunlight. The human must die before the treaty is signed." One by one, the traditionalists nodded their agreement. Plans were made, weapons were distributed, assignments were given. Unknown to any of them, a young crouched in the shadows behind a pillar, listening to every word. Had come to speak with about his sister's defeat, hoping to understand what had happened in the arena. Instead, he had stumbled upon a conspiracy. His heart pounded as he realized what he had to do. He had to warn Daniel. He had to stop this assassination before it could happen. He tried to slip away quietly, but his foot caught on a loose stone. The sound was small, barely a whisper of noise, but his warrior instincts caught it instantly. "Someone is there," said. "Find them." Ran. He made it 3 steps before a hand closed around his throat and slammed him against the wall. His burning eyes appeared inches from his face. "Little," said with cold amusement. "The boy whose father owes his life to human medics. I should have known you would be lurking where you do not belong." "Let me go," gasped. "What you are planning is wrong." "What I am planning is necessary, and now you have become a problem," tightened his grip. "Take him to the cells, keep him alive for now. I may have questions for him later." Guards dragged away into the darkness. His last thought before unconsciousness took him was a desperate hope that somehow Daniel would learn of the danger in time. Across the palace, Daniel stood at his window, watching the stars and allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. He had done the impossible today. He had shown what humanity was capable of. He did not know that death was already moving toward him through the shadows. The assassins came at midnight. Daniel was sitting in his quarters, reviewing the treaty documents had sent him, when his instincts screamed a warning. Years of combat experience had taught him to trust that feeling without question. He was already moving when the door burst open. 3 warriors rushed into the room, blades drawn and killing intent clear in their burning eyes. Daniel grabbed the chair he had been sitting on and hurled it at the lead attacker. The warrior deflected it easily, but the distraction gave Daniel time to reach the window. He smashed through the glass and dropped onto the balcony below. More assassins were waiting there. Daniel ducked under a slashing blade and drove his elbow into the attacker's throat. The warrior collapsed, choking, and Daniel took his weapon. Now armed, Daniel fought his way along the balcony toward the diplomatic quarters where and the rest of the human delegation were housed. He had to warn them. He had to keep them safe. Alarms began to sound throughout the palace. Guards rushed through the corridors, but Daniel could not tell which ones were loyal and which ones might be part of the conspiracy. He trusted no one except himself. He reached the door and pounded on it with his bandaged fist. "Ambassador, we are under attack. We need to move." The door opened and appeared, already dressed and alert. Years of diplomatic work in dangerous regions had taught her to sleep lightly and dress quickly. "What is happening?" she demanded. "Assassination attempt. Traditionalists most likely. We need to reach the emperor." They ran through the corridors together, Daniel leading with his captured blade ready. Twice more they encountered assassins, and twice more Daniel cut them down. His bandaged hands ached with every strike, but he ignored the pain. As they rounded a corner near the throne room, a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows to block their path. Stood before them, her ceremonial blade in her upper hands and her expression unreadable. Daniel raised his weapon, prepared to fight again if necessary, but did not attack. Instead, she looked at the dead assassins behind him and the blood on his bandages, and something shifted in her face. "My brother is behind this," she said quietly. "Believes he is protecting our traditions. He does not understand that he is destroying our honor." "Your brother said." "He leads the traditionalist faction now that I have been disgraced. When I lost to the human, power shifted to him." His voice was heavy with shame and anger. "I did not know he would go this far. Assassination is cowardice. It spits on everything our ancestors believed." Daniel lowered his weapon slightly. "Will you help us stop him?" The question hung in the air between them. Was being asked to betray her own blood, to side with the humans she had despised against her own brother? It was the hardest choice she had ever faced. She thought of the arena. She thought of Daniel catching her blade barehanded. She thought of the mercy he had shown her when he had every right to take her life. "Yes," she said, "I will help you." Together, the three of them fought their way toward the throne room, knew the palace better than any assassin, and she led them through hidden passages that avoided the main corridors. Along the way, Daniel told her about's warning before the duel. "If was involved, may have him prisoner," said. "My brother does not tolerate disloyalty." "Then we save him too," Daniel said. They found the throne room under siege. Stood before the emperor's seat with a dozen warriors at his back, demanding that the emperor cancel the treaty and expel the humans from space. The emperor sat calmly on his throne, refusing to yield, but his guards were outnumbered. Daniel burst through a side entrance, turned to face them, and his face twisted with rage when he saw his sister standing beside the humans. "Traitor," he snarled, "you disgrace our bloodline." "I disgrace nothing," shot back. "You are the one who has forgotten what honor means. Our ancestors settled disputes in open combat, face to face, blade against blade. They did not send killers in the night like cowards. I do what is necessary to protect our people. You protect only your own pride." The two siblings stared at each other across the throne room, and the weight of their broken bond filled the air between them. Then raised his blade and charged. The battle was fierce and brutal. Daniel fought side by side against warriors, their blades flashing in the torchlight. The emperor's loyal guards joined the fight, and soon the throne room was filled with the clash of metal and the cries of the wounded. Daniel found himself face to face with. The warrior was larger and stronger than his sister, his 4 arms wielding 2 blades with deadly skill. Daniel dodged, searching for an opening. "You should have died in the arena," growled. "My sister was supposed to end you." "Your sister was supposed to do a lot of things," Daniel replied, "but people have a way of surprising us." He ducked under a sweeping strike and drove his blade into his leg. The warrior stumbled, and Daniel pressed his advantage. Within moments, he had disarmed and on his knees. The remaining assassins saw their leader fall and surrendered. Guards quickly restrained them, while the emperor rose from his throne to survey the damage. "Where is," Daniel asked, "the young one who warned me about the duel? What did you do with him?" "Spat on the ground. The cells beneath the East Tower. Much good it will do you. The boy betrayed his own kind for you humans. He deserves whatever fate finds him." Daniel turned to, "Show me where." They ran through the palace until they reached a dark stairway leading down into the earth. At the bottom, they found a row of cells carved into the stone. Lay in one of them, bruised and bloody but alive. Daniel broke the lock and lifted the young to his feet. "You saved my life twice now, first with your warning and tonight by trying to alert me again. I will not forget this." Managed a weak smile. "My father was right about humans. You are worth saving." The next morning, Emperor summoned everyone to the throne room for judgment. Knelt in chains before the imperial seat, his face defiant even in defeat. "You have broken the sacred laws of our people," the emperor declared. "You have attempted assassination against honored guests. You have betrayed the code that defines what it means to be. The penalty is death." He turned to Daniel. "However, I have learned something from watching our human visitor. I have learned that sometimes mercy can be a greater display of strength than execution. Therefore, I leave the sentence in your hands, Daniel Carter. What would you have me do with this traitor?" Daniel looked at, seeing the hatred still burning in those orange eyes. He thought about justice and revenge and the difference between them. "Exile," Daniel said. "Strip him of his titles and send him away from this world. Let him live knowing that he failed, and let his failure be a lesson to anyone else who might follow his path." The emperor nodded slowly. "So it shall be." As guards led away, approached Daniel. For a long moment she simply looked at him, studying his face as if seeing him for the first time. Then she knelt and placed her blade at his feet, the highest gesture of respect in culture. "You have taught me something valuable," she said. "I thought strength meant winning at any cost. I thought honor meant never backing down, but you showed me a different way. You showed me that the greatest warriors are those who know when not to fight, who show mercy when they could show cruelty." She rose and looked him in the eye. "I will create a new order of warriors. They will train alongside humans and learn your ways. We will become stronger together than either of us could be alone." Daniel smiled and clasped her forearm in the warrior's gesture of respect. "I look forward to seeing what we build." The treaty was signed that afternoon, achieved everything she had hoped for and more. Trade routes opened. Cultural exchanges began. The first warriors departed for Earth to train with human forces. As Daniel boarded the transport ship to return home, came to see him off. She stood at the bottom of the ramp, her copper skin gleaming in the sunlight, her blade at her side. "You changed how my people see humanity," she said. "We no longer think of you as weak creatures from a gentle world. We think of you as something far more interesting. Warriors who choose their battles. Killers who choose not to kill." Daniel nodded. "That is the only kind of strength worth having." The story spread across the galaxy in the weeks that followed. Other species heard of the human who had stopped a blade barehanded, who had conquered an empire not with violence but with mercy. They began to look at humanity differently, to wonder what other surprises these strange creatures from Earth might hold. And somewhere among the stars, a new alliance was born, forged in blood and sealed with compassion, between two peoples who had learned to see the strength in each other.